After studying this module, you shall be able to examine and understand the nature of public utilities as natural monopolies and analyze the associated problems of regulating these utilities. Revisit the concept of price discrimination and study intertemporal price discrimination and examine the characteristics that differentiate intertemporal price discrimination from peak load pricing. Analyze the concept of peak load pricing and the conditions under which it is applicable. You would also learn to comprehend the role played by this pricing practice in pricing of utilities and in regulation of monopolies. You would also learn to understand how a pricing strategy like peak load pricing can help increase the profits of firms and reduce the deadweight loss to society under special cost and demand conditions. Also, we would learn to study the special shifting peak case as a special case under the peak load pricing practice. Public utilities in most economies are natural monopolies wherein a single firm can cater to the entire market more efficiently than a large number of firms. These exist because of a high fixed cost of operating in a particular industry. Since these utilities have no real competition and at the same time it is economically rational to allow certain natural monopolies, governments often regulate those in operation. The regulatory bodies monitor the prices charged by electric, telephone and other public utilities to ensure that the companies get a fair rate of return on their investments while at the same time making sure that the consumers are not exploited. Intricate systems of price discrimination exist in the rate structure of these public utilities, and the regulatory commissions also control the extent, if any, to which price discrimination is used by these public utilities. Public utilities often follow the practice of peak load pricing, in which the discrimination base is related to the time when the service is provided, temporal. To understand the application of peak load pricing on monopoly regulation, we begin with a brief discussion on natural monopoly. Price discrimination. Let us now move our discussion to price discrimination. Price discrimination is the practice of charging different prices in different markets for different quantities or at different points of time for the same product without any difference in costs to the producer in supplying the product. Price discrimination can be successfully implemented only if certain conditions are met, which are as follows. The first condition is that the price discrimination is possible only if the producer possesses some degree of monopoly power and has a downward sloping demand curve. Without monopoly power, the producer would be unable to charge different prices from different consumers. The second condition is the identification of different market segments with different elasticity of demand should be possible. This would help the producer gauge at least approximately the maximum amount different consumers are willing to pay for each unit of output. The third condition is that it should be possible to keep the different market segments separate and distinct. This separation could be done based on time, physical distance, and nature of the product or its use or any other basis. It is essential that there is no arbitrage between any two market segments that would enable a consumer to purchase at the low price in the elastic market segment and then resell in the inelastic market segment at a higher price. Easy resale of the product would render price discrimination to be ineffective. There are three types of price discrimination: first degree, second degree, and third degree price discrimination. First degree or perfect price discrimination means that the producer is able to charge the maximum possible price that the consumer is willing to pay for each unit of the product sold and thereby capture all available consumer surplus. Second degree price discrimination implies charging different prices for different quantities of the product. Quantity discounts for bulk purchases and two-part tariffs are examples of second degree price discrimination. For instance, consider the case of electricity pricing. Consumers purchase several kilowatt hours of electricity in a month, but the price that they are willing to pay decreases with increased consumption. In this case, power utilities adopting block pricing are actually practicing second degree price discrimination by discriminating on the basis of the quantity consumed. The third degree price discrimination is the most common form of price discrimination and involves charging different prices to different consumer groups based on their different demand elasticity. The groups are differentiated on the basis of easily identifiable characteristics such as location, age, sex, or other characteristics.
Public utility or regulation, that is natural monopoly. A natural monopoly is a monopoly in an industry in which it is most efficient, involving the lowest long-run average cost for production to be concentrated in a single firm. Natural monopolies arise when the average cost of production of a firm reaches a minimum at an output level large enough to satisfy the entire market, that too at a price that is profitable. Public utilities that require large-scale infrastructure to ensure supply of their services are typical examples of natural monopolies. Natural monopolies involve extremely high fixed costs of distribution. For instance, the cost of producing power and supplying it to each individual household can be very substantial. These huge fixed costs of distribution act as strong deterrents for possible competitors. Increasing competition in case of natural monopolies by encouraging new entrants into the market results in an efficiency loss to the society, as the new entrants would have to replicate the entire required infrastructure. As mentioned earlier, a natural monopoly exists when economies of scale operate or when the scale of production that achieves productive efficiency is a large proportion of the total size of the market of the product. Hence, if a single firm exploits the majority of economies of scale available, then there is no scope for more firms to enter the market. In case of natural monopolies, Figure 1, the long-run average total costs (LAC) keep falling as a result of economies of scale associated with larger output, and the long-run marginal cost (LMC) is always below the average total cost. Public utilities require huge initial outlays in the form of expensive infrastructure to deliver the good or service, such as in the cases of electricity, water supply, telephone services, etc. Hence, being natural monopolies and having no real competition, government intervention is essential to ensure that public utilities do not abuse their market power by setting higher prices. The conduct of such firms is commonly regulated by state regulatory commissions that monitor the prices charged by them, Figure 1, and also keep in check the extent, if any, to which price discrimination is used by these public utilities. In the above figure 1, the AR and the MR curves represent the market demand and marginal revenue curves for the public utility. The LAC and the LMC curves are the long run average and marginal costs respectively. If the public utility provider were to act as a monopolist, they would produce QM level of output and charge a price equal to PM per unit, hence making a profit equal to the rectangular region ACM, PM, EM2, EM3. This level of output is not the most efficient since average costs are declining. Further, since the price charged is greater than the marginal cost incurred, more of the public utility service is desirable from the society's perspective. The public utility regulator would typically ensure a level of output at which P is equal to LAC or an output level of QRC with the price of PRC being charged per unit. Such an output level would ensure that the public utility is able to earn a normal rate of return. However, the price PRC is still greater than the marginal cost of producing this level of output. Hence, even in this level of output leads to a welfare loss to society equal to the triangular region ERC, ERC1, ESO. The socially optimum output is where P is equal to MC or QX0. But at this level of output, the average cost of production, that is ACSO, exceeds the price per unit being charged, PS0. This implies that the public utility would be incurring losses equal to the tune of the rectangular region ACS0, PS0, ES0, ES01. The public utility would therefore not supply the social optimum output equal to QS0 unless it is provided with subsidies to cover its losses. In general, regulatory commissions allow public utilities to charge prices that cover their average costs so as to allow them to break even in the long run. In reality, there are several problems associated with public utility regulation. For instance, it is difficult to determine the rate of return considered to be normal for public utilities. Also, since public utility services are provided to different classes of consumers, who in turn have different elasticity of demand, a huge mix of different rate schedules can be allowed. Again, there are certain utilities whose demand is higher in some periods and lower at other times, which warrants that different prices be charged during peak and off-peak periods.
Next is the peak load pricing and intertemporal price discrimination. Intertemporal price discrimination works under the assumption that the marginal cost associated with the output at different points in time is constant. However, this assumption does not always hold. Producers can at times charge different prices at different points in time, not only due to different elasticity of different segments of consumers, but also due to difference in the cost of producing the same product at different times. Such a pricing strategy is referred to as peak load pricing, wherein the different prices not only reflect the different demands but also different costs. Thus, peak load pricing is to some extent similar to third degree price discrimination. In both cases, the discrimination base is temporal, which means related to the time when the service is provided. However, peak load pricing strategy is applied when there is a marginal cost difference between peak and off-peak use. When there is no marginal cost difference between peak and off-peak use, peak load pricing is an application is an exact application of third degree, which is intertemporal price discrimination. The following section discusses this pricing practice in detail.
Intertemporal price discrimination. Intertemporal price discrimination is a common form of third degree price discrimination frequently observed in markets for consumer durable goods as well as services. Sellers of latest high-tech mobile phones, tablets, computer hardware, or any other kind of electronic devices typically start out with high prices in order to maximize their profits and extract maximum consumer surplus from the impatient high demand customers, and gradually prices are lowered. Another example of intertemporal price discrimination is charging of different fares by airlines for the same journey at different seasons of the year. Similarly, restaurants offering early bird dinner offers or happy hour discounts also practice intertemporal price discrimination. Morning movie shows are generally cheaper than post-noon shows, again reflecting intertemporal price discrimination. Consider an example of a movie theater. Morning weekday shows have less number of takers and evening and weekend shows have more demand. Further, the demand for movie tickets is relatively inelastic for evening and weekend shows and more elastic for the morning weekday shows. The theater can make larger profits by charging higher prices for the evening and weekend shows and a lower price for the morning weekday shows. Through this kind of an arrangement, the movie theater allows consumers to decide how much they are willing to pay to view the movie at different points in time. Figure 2 illustrates this scenario. DE and DM represent the demand curves of the evening oblique weekend and morning weekday moviegoers respectively. DM is more elastic than DE. MRE and MRM represent the marginal revenue curves of the evening oblique weekend and morning weekday moviegoers respectively. MC represents the common marginal cost curve for the theater. In order to determine the profit maximizing output, the monopolist would equate the common MC curve with the horizontal summation of the two MR curves, that is sigma MR. In the above figure, this occurs at point E with output level Q being the optimum output. This output is then divided between the two market segments, the division being determined by points where individual marginal revenues equal the common marginal cost determined from point E. Since there is no possibility of arbitrage between the two different segments of moviegoers, the movie theater can increase profits by charging different prices to the two market segments, that is PE to customers watching the movies in the evening or weekend shows, and PM to moviegoers who have the more elastic morning show demand. This price discrimination, that is of third degree, would result in profits being greater than if a common movie ticket price were charged for all the movie shows. There are certain products and services for which demand varies by time of the day, the week, the season, or the year, and supply costs also vary with the extent of demand. For instance, the demand for electricity is higher during the day than at night, power being demanded by both businesses and homes during day. The demand for calls is also higher during the daytime business hours than during the rest of the day. Similarly, toll roads or highways have more traffic during rush office hours than at other times of the day. Airlines face heavier traffic during holidays than otherwise and on Mondays and Fridays rather than other days of the week. In such cases, price structures should be constructed to reflect these conditions. Public utilities are often plagued with the problem of high peak period demand and low off-peak period demand. This problem leads to underutilization of capacity available. These utilities require an appropriate pricing policy that would ensure efficient utilization of capacity while covering the costs of the resources used. In general, it is difficult to satisfy consumer demands during peak periods, and profit maximization requires that a higher price be charged for the product or service during the peak period and a lower price be charged during the off-peak period. Peak load pricing is the practice of charging a higher price for a service when demand is high and capacity is fully utilized, and a lower price where demand is low and capacity is underutilized. Thus, it entails charging different prices during peak and off-peak hours. A firm should engage in peak load pricing if the demand for the product or service during peak times is so high that the capacity of the firm cannot serve all customers at the same price. In such a scenario, higher prices can be charged during the peak demand hours and prices can be lowered during off-peak demand hours. This showed this lowering of price during the low peak demand enables the firm to increase its profits by selling to some consumers during the low peak times than to none at all. With higher peak period prices, the firm is able to capture a part of the consumer surplus because of the higher willingness to pay of the consumers during the peak period. A uniform price would lead to lower profits of the firm. Hence, just like a firm selling in many markets can increase profits by using price discrimination, a firm using the same facility to supply several markets at different points of time can increase total profits by using peak load pricing. The peak load pricing principle requires that the consumers who value a product or service the most and impose the greatest demand on the production capacity should also pay more for that capacity. This principle can be applied if the following conditions are met. The product or service is not storable, or if storable, the costs of storing are high. It is the same facility that provide the service at different periods of time. There is variation in the characteristics of demand between the different periods of time. In simple words, the peak and off-peak demand are differently valued. For instance, we follow a simple model assuming two independent loads of equal length in a demand cycle, such as a single day. The firm aims at maximizing its profits. This firm could be any public utility, such as a telecom service provider, a toll bridge operator, or an electric power supplier, or any other good/service with the above mentioned three characteristics. D peak and D off peak are the respective demand curves of the peak and off peak period segments. D off peak is lower than D peak and the two demands are assumed to be independent. The assumption of independent demands implies that price in one period has no effect on the quantity demanded in the other period. The SRMC curve is the marginal or operating costs of the firm, assumed to be constant till peak capacity output level QP is reached. Thus, the firm has a rigid plant size with SRMC equal to B for output levels smaller than QP, the optimal plant size in the given figure. At this output level, the SRMC curve becomes vertical, reflecting that increasing output beyond this level requires increasing the firm's capacity in terms of maybe building another plant. Beta represents the cost of an additional unit of capacity, and the LRMC at the level B plus beta represents the marginal cost to supply a unit of output. The LRMC helps determine if the existing plant size is optimal. B, as mentioned above, are the per unit operating charges per day. Following the peak load pricing principle, the price in each period should be set where the SRMC intersects the relevant demand curve. Thus, price would be PP is equal to B plus beta in the peak load period as demand presses against capacity. The off-peak period price is POP equal to B as no additional capacity is required. Faced with these prices, the peak period users would purchase output level QP and QOP is the off-peak period output. QP, the peak period demand, is also the firm's capacity output, as at this output level, SRMC equals the LRMC. Hence, the off-peak consumers are charged marginal operating costs only, and the peak users marginal operating and marginal capacity costs, as it is the on-peakers who cause a strain on capacity. Peak load prices vis-a-vis a uniform price. If the firm charged a uniform high price of PP, no one would purchase during low peak periods. By lowering the price during low peak times but charging a high price during high peak times, the firm increases its profit by selling to some consumers during low peak times. Shifting peak case. We now consider a shifting peak case where both the demands of the peak and off-peak segments are closer. In this case, we consider the impact of charging the peak demanders all the capacity costs. We make a simplifying assumption regarding marginal operating costs and consider them to be 0. If the peak demanders are charged a price equal to beta to cover marginal operating and marginal capacity costs, they would demand QP of output. The off-peak users, in this case, would demand an output level QOP as the marginal operating costs, in this case, are 0. As can be seen, the demand of the off-peak users exceed the demand of the peak period users. Hence, this represents the shifting peak case. In this case, to obtain the optimal capacity, we vertically add the demand curves of the two different segments. This total willingness to pay curve, or the sigma DD curve in our figure, is then equated with the LRMC to obtain the optimal capacity output of Q star, and the two demand segments share the costs of producing this capacity output. The price charged from the off-peak users is POP, and that from peak period users is PP. The peak and off-peak prices add up to the capacity costs, beta. Peak load pricing problem, a mathematical analysis. Continuing with our simple model and considering a good/service that is non-storable and is produced and supplied in two independent loads of equal length in a demand cycle such as a single day. The firm aims at maximizing its profits. We assume that time period 1 is the off-peak period and 2 is the peak period. It is assumed that the price charged in period 1 is given as P1 for I equal to 1 and 2, and that P1 is less than P2. It is assumed that the price charged in period I is given as Pi for I is equal to 1 and 2, and that P1 is less than P2. The producer chooses to supply quantities in each period I given by Qi for I is equal to 1 and 2. Since period 1 represents the off-peak period and period 2 the peak period, it is assumed that Q2 is greater than Q1 for each price. The operating costs per unit per period are denoted by B, and beta represents the cost of an additional unit of capacity. Both of these are assumed to be constant. B plus beta thus represent the constant marginal cost to supply a unit of output. Capacity output is equal to capital Q. The firm's profit function is given by P1 Q1 plus P2 Q2 minus BQ1 minus BQ2 minus beta Q. This is equation 1. Setting up the Lagrangian function, L is equal to P1 Q1 plus P2 Q2 minus BQ1 minus BQ2 minus beta Q minus lambda 2 into Q2 minus capital Q into lambda 1 into Q1 minus Q, which is equation 2. We correspondingly get the following Kuhn-Tucker maximizing conditions, which is Q1 star greater than equal to 0, P1 minus B minus lambda 1 star less than equal to 0, Q1 star into P1 minus B minus lambda 1 star is equal to 0, equation 3. Similarly, Q2 star greater than equal to 0, P2 minus B minus lambda 2 star less than equal to 0, and Q2 star into P1 minus B minus lambda 2 star is equal to 0, equation 4. Q star greater than equal to 0 minus beta plus lambda 1 star plus lambda 2 star less than equal to 0, and Q star into minus beta plus lambda 1 star plus lambda 2 star is equal to 0 is our fifth equation. Next equation is lambda 1 star greater than equal to 0 minus Q1 star plus Q star greater than equal to 0, lambda 1 star into minus Q10 plus Q star is equal to 0, equation 6. And our last equation is lambda 2 star greater than equal to 0 minus Q2 star plus Q star greater than equal to 0, and lambda 2 star into minus Q2 star plus Q star equal to 0. This is our seventh equation.
Let us now summarize what we have learned in this module. Public utilities in most economies are natural monopolies, wherein a single firm can cater to the entire market more efficiently than a large number of firms. Being natural monopolies, the conduct of such firms is commonly regulated by state regulatory commissions that monitor the prices charged by them and also keep in check the extent, if any, to which price discrimination is used by these public utilities. Price discrimination is the practice of charging different prices in different markets for different quantities or at different points of time for the same product without any difference in costs to the producer in supplying the product. Under intertemporal price discrimination, different market segments are willing to pay different prices depending on the time at which they purchase the good. It works under the assumption that the marginal cost associated with the output at different points in time is constant. Peak load pricing strategy involves producers charging different prices at different points in time, not only due to different elasticity of different segment of consumers, but also due to the difference in the cost of producing the same product at different times. Peak load pricing principle requires that the consumers who value a product or service the most and impose the greatest demand on the production capacity should also pay more for that capacity. It can be applied if the product or service is not storable, the same facilities provide the service at different periods of time, and if the peak and off-peak demand is differently valued. Under peak load pricing, the off-peak consumers are charged marginal operating costs only, and the peak users marginal operating and marginal capacity costs, as it is the on-peakers who put a strain on capacity. By lowering the price during low peak times but charging a high price during high peak times, the firms increase its profits by selling to some consumers during low peak times.